Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. In Afghanistan, the government says the Taliban have seized an army checkpoint, killing 8 soldiers in central Ghor province. A spokesman for the Ghor governor said 6 others were wounded during the attack in Shahrukh district. The Taliban have not yet commented. In the US, security forces and the demonstrators have clashed for a second night in Wisconsin after police shot a black man on Sunday. The state announced a curfew as protesters set cars on fire and smashed windows of surrounding buildings. Democratic Governor Tony Evers said he has summoned the National Guard that will protect infrastructure and rescue services. India has become the world's worst hit country by COVID-19, reporting the highest number of daily fresh cases in the world for the last 19 days. The Indian Health Ministry has reported 848 deaths and nearly 61,000 infections in a day, bringing the total cases to over 3.1 million. In Pakistan, 9 people have lost their lives to the virus overnight, taking the toll to 6,255 with over 293,000 infections. Globally, the pandemic has infected over 23.5 million people and claimed more than 813,000 lives. Turkey and Greece have announced conducting rival naval exercises off the Greek island of Crete. The announcement comes amid rising tensions over claims to gas and oil in the eastern Mediterranean by the two countries. News coming in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now we'll have the news in detail. We start our news bulletin from Afghanistan, where the government says the Taliban have seized an army checkpoint, killing 8 soldiers in central Ghor province. A spokesman for the Ghor governor said 6 others were wounded during the attack in the Shahrukh district. He added that the checkpoint is still under Taliban control. The Taliban have not yet commented. In the United States, security forces and demonstrators have clashed for a second night in Wisconsin after police shot a black man on Sunday. Democratic Governor Tony Evers said he has summoned the U.S. National Guard to protect the infrastructure and rescue services. A curfew has also been imposed in the state. This report has details.
Another African-American, Jacob Blake's shooting in Kenosha, Wisconsin, has turned the lakeside city into the nation's latest flashpoint in a summer of racial unrest. Angry demonstrators set cars on fire, smashed windows, and clashed with officers overnight as Blake continued to fight for his life in the hospital. Speaking at a press conference, Kenosha Mayor John Martin Antamian said a third party will conduct an investigation into the incident. Hundreds of protesters confronted the mayor during his press conference.
The whole concept here is to talk about that we are going to make sure that justice is done for everyone, that people will have the right to make sure that the investigation is taken care of and is done correctly. And we have brought in, Mayor of Kenosha, we have brought in whenever a situation like this occurs, a third party must do the investigation. The state of Wisconsin is doing that investigation.
Unidentified protesters asked the mayor to arrest and charge the officer involved, while others kept asking for the name of the police officer. Demonstrators said the incident did not need a third-party inquiry as Blake was shot 7 times in the back in front of his children.
He said it has to go through a third-party investigation. That process in itself needs to be eliminated. That third-party investigation, no. The whole entire process, the system is completely corrupt. So for you to say that there needs to be the same process, third-party, then an investigator, then through the DA, that is the problem. That is where that is the problem. The process in attacking these officers who are constantly attacking these people.
Amid the increasingly tense exchange, Mayor Antramayan retreated back into the building as the police in riot gear pepper sprayed the crowd. Democrats have called for an immediate investigation into the incident in the key presidential battleground state, while the Republicans have warned against rushing to judgment.
In the U.S., Republicans have nominated President Donald Trump for a second term in the White House at the National Convention in North Carolina. He will face Democrats' candidate Joe Biden in the presidential election scheduled for the 3rd of November. Addressing delegates, Trump accused Democrats of trying to steal the election through increased mail-in voting. The Republican Party nominated Mike Pence as vice president. Speaking at the event, Pence said the choice in this election has never been clearer and the stakes have never been higher. On Thursday, Trump will formally accept the nomination with a big speech. Ahead of the election, Biden is leading Trump in opinion polls, while his fellow Democrats dubbed the president a force for darkness. Top trade negotiators from China and the U.S. have held a phone conversation to review the progress of Phase 1 trade deal. In a statement, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer said China's compliance with the trade deal was evaluated during the talks. It said Lighthizer, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and Chinese Vice Premier Liu He reaffirmed their commitment to fully implementing the deal. It said the two sides addressed Beijing's structural changes to ensure greater protection of intellectual property rights. The statement added both leaders also discussed significant increases in purchases of U.S. products by Beijing. The call was originally scheduled for August 15 before President Donald Trump indefinitely postponed the 6-monthly review of the agreement. Moving on now, India has become the worst hit country by COVID-19, reporting the world's highest number of daily fresh cases for the last 19 days. The Indian Health Ministry has reported 848 deaths and nearly 61,000 infections in a day. Globally, the virus has infected over 23.6 million people and claimed more than 813,000 lives. This report has more.
As the new coronavirus outbreak in the Americas slow, India has become the virus epicenter, with the number of cases and deaths continuing to surge drastically. The caseload in the country of over 1 billion people has crossed 3.1 million with over 58,000 deaths. In Jamaica, the world's fastest man could not outrun the virus as Usain Bolt has tested positive for the coronavirus. With some governments developing vaccines, WHO Chief Tedros Ghebreyesus has urged other countries to join forces.
Last week, I sent a letter to all member states requesting them to join the vaccine arm of the ACT Accelerator. I'm pleased to announce that as of today, 172 countries are now engaging with the COVAX Global Vaccines Facility, which has both the largest and most diverse COVID-19 vaccine portfolio in the world.
In Europe, France has reported a rise in COVID-19 deaths and cases as authorities scramble to curb the spread. Meanwhile, Spain has reimposed restrictions on mobility and mass gatherings after an increase in nationwide caseload.
The restrictions were relaxed too soon in Spain, with very short intervals between each phase. Theoretically, there should be 15 days in transition, but it only took a few days or less than a week to move into the next phase. Besides, Spain has limited capacity when tracing close contact, so the virus is said to spread if they cannot be found.
In Asia, mainland China has reported 14 new imported cases with no domestic transmissions in the 9th consecutive day. South Korea reported fresh cases under 300 for the second day, with 280 infections overnight. Over in Australia, cases are up from the previous day but under peak levels. In New Zealand, lockdown in the country's largest city, Auckland, has been extended to the end of the week.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the number of active COVID-19 cases has dipped under 10,000 as the spread of the virus continues to decline in the country. The Health Ministry says the recovery rate from the disease is 94% in the country. It says 9 more people died, while 450 new cases were found across the country over the past 24 hours. The nationwide death toll stands at 6,255. Sindh remains the worst-hit province, witnessing nearly 128,000 infections, while Punjab has reported over 96,000 cases so far. Now, Pakistan has strongly condemned the latest missile and drone attacks towards Saudi Arabia by Yemen's Houthi militia. In a statement, the Foreign Office said Islamabad appreciates the successful interception of missile and drone which prevented the loss of innocent lives. Foreign Office said Pakistan calls for an immediate cessation of such attacks. The statement added Pakistan reiterates its full support for Saudi Arabia against any threats to its security. On Sunday, the Saudi-led coalition destroyed an explosive-laden drone launched towards the kingdom. A coalition spokesman confirmed Houthi rebels had launched the drone. Moving on, Israel says its military has targeted a Hamas tunnel and some military points in the fresh series of airstrikes in southern Gaza. Israel's defense forces accuse Hamas operatives of targeting Jewish settlements with incendiary balloons. It said the airstrikes were a response to the attacks. No casualties or injuries have been reported so far. The Syrian Constitutional Committee's meeting has been put on hold as 3 members test positive for COVID-19. The Syrian government, opposition and civil society members were to resume meetings in Geneva to discuss the possible new constitution. In a statement, the UN said committee members were tested before they travelled to Geneva and again on travel. It said the first meeting was constructive, but the third session is on hold and Special Envoy will make a further announcement in due course. The UN Syria envoy, Geir Pedersen, is hosting the 3 15-member teams from Syria, while Iran, Russia, Turkey and the US will be present on the sidelines during the week-long gathering. Meanwhile, Turkey and Greece have announced conducting rival naval exercises off the Greek island of Crete. The announcement comes amid rising tensions between the two countries over claims to gas and oil in the eastern Mediterranean. Greece announced its drills after Turkey extended the exploration mission of its Oruk Reis survey ship in disputed waters. Turkey has sent out an official warning to other vessels to avoid the area. President Tayyip Erdogan warned Athens, who throw Greece in front of Turkey, will not support it.
Starting from now, the only one who will be responsible for any negativity in the region will be Greece, and the only one that will be harmed from it will be themselves as well. I think our Greek neighbors will benefit from knowing the fact, just as we do, that the ones who throw Greece in front of Turkish Navy will not stand behind them.
Meanwhile, Turkish Foreign Ministry says German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas will visit both the countries on Wednesday to discuss the Mediterranean issues. Now, in Mauritius, the planned sinking of the broken stem of a Japanese-owned ship that caused a devastating oil spill in the ocean has completed in the open ocean. The National Crisis Committee says a major part of the vessel has been buried 3,000 meters into the ocean. The committee said a smaller section of the ship remains wedged on the reef, which the Japan's shipping company will remove soon. The company also said it will continue to collect suspended matter and work with local authorities to remove oil that has drifted to the coast. Earlier, Mauritius declared an environmental emergency when a Japanese oil carrier ran aground, causing a massive oil spill of 1,000 tons. Since then, joint efforts by the Japanese and Mauritian authorities have removed most of the more than 5,000 tons of oil on board. Now in India, 1 person has died while at least 30 still trapped in the debris of a 5-story building that collapsed south of India's financial capital, Mumbai. Authorities said rescue teams have pulled out 60 people alive. They said the building was comprised of at least 47 flats, which housed roughly 200 residents. Several parts of Mumbai and its neighboring areas have been witnessing heavy rainfall, affecting thousands of people. A massive blaze has severely damaged a 139-year-old mosque in South African city of Durban. Emergency services say it isn't yet known if the incident was an accidental or an act of vandalism. Firefighters have managed to control the fire. They said the blaze also damaged 3 adjacent buildings. No loss of life has been reported so far. The mosque is a landmark of central Durban and a well-attended house of worship. It has been visited by prominent figures including anti-apartheid icon Nelson Mandela and boxing superstar Muhammad Ali. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. Talks between the West African envoys and Mali's military have ended without a deal on how the country should return to civilian rule following last week's coup. Mali's military said the Western African mediation team will report to heads of state on the progress before a summit on the country later this week. It said the final decision on the makeup of an interim transitional administration will be made by Malians. It said no timeline has been established for elections to return to the country to civilian rule. The coup leaders previously said they will stage elections in the country within a reasonable time. The two sides met ousted President Ibrahim Keita in the capital Bamako separately and said he no longer wished to resume duties. The UN has urged Libya's internationally recognized government to conduct an investigation into use of force against demonstrators in Tripoli. In a statement, the UN support mission in Libya said excessive use of force by pro-government security personnel wounded a number of protesters. On Sunday, hundreds gathered in the capital to protest against the deteriorating living conditions. They also vented their frustration at poor basic services and corruption in the war-torn country. According to reports citing witnesses, security personnel fired into the air to disperse the demonstrators. Interior Minister Fathi Bashagha called those responsible for the violence outlaws who infiltrated the security forces, supervising the protest. The protest came 2 days after Prime Minister Faiz al-Sarraj announced a ceasefire in Libya's long-running conflict. Now, Amnesty International says over 1,100 people have been killed in northern Nigeria's rural areas during the first half of the year. In a statement, the director of the rights group in Nigeria said civilians in Kaduna and 3 other states reported living in constant fear. The Amnesty said villages in the south of Kaduna were affected the most, with at least 366 people killed since January. It said during one attack, security forces arrived at the scene but left when they saw the sophisticated ammunition the attackers were using. The watchdog said the ongoing failure of security forces to protect villagers is shameful. Armed groups set fires to villages and frequently kidnap people for ransom. Santas in the UK are getting special training lessons to learn how to celebrate this year's festival by protecting themselves and the children from COVID-19. More about the lesson in this report.
Making sure Christmas can go ahead as usual, Santas in the UK have had a training lesson to learn how they can make traditional grottos COVID-safe this year. Entertainment company Ministry of Fun has been running Santa School for 25 years. This year, they decided to get everyone together even earlier than normal to reassure their clients and the public that it's possible to make the experience safe during the coronavirus pandemic. James Lowell, who founded the organization and ran the training event in central London, explained there are 3 key changes they have put in place.
Okay, right. First of all, masks. So we've created these masks, which, as you can see, they're red velvet with white fur trim, just like Santa's costume. We made a feature of a mask. Secondly, there's the social distance grotto. And then thirdly is the giving the present. At the end of every meeting with a child, Santa gives children a present. And we need to make sure that can be done without Santa actually having to hand the present to the child.
Lowell said last year they had over 1,000 bookings over an 8-week period for Santas. But this year, business is slower than usual, with bookings down to half the normal numbers.
The Penguin Post. The Penguin Post.
We do have bookings. We don't have as many as normal. So I would say we've probably got under half of the bookings we would normally have. So that's having a big impact potentially on our turnover for the year. But the people, again, the people that haven't booked us haven't said no. They're still deciding what to do. There have been mixed messages, and I understand that, that the messages coming from Downing Street have not necessarily always been that clear. So people aren't entirely sure about what they can do. And I'm hoping that what we're doing here today at Santa School is showing people what they can do, and that they can do it magically.
Heaping praise on the performers who take on the role of Santa, Lowell couldn't disclose how much they get paid, but said the job is harder than it looks.
Now, TikTok has sued the US government over President Donald Trump's executive order banning the company's American operations. In the filing in federal court, TikTok said Trump administration's move was motivated by politics, not national security. The popular short-form video sharing app called Trump's decision a pretext to fuel anti-China rhetoric as he seeks re-election. It said the company has taken extraordinary measures to protect the privacy and security of user data. Earlier this month, Trump dubbed the video sharing app a national security threat. Qantas Airways says it will lay off 2,500 more people by outsourcing its Australian ground handling operations. Qantas head of domestic operations Andrew David says outsourcing the move will save an estimated $72 million each year in operating costs. The airliner says the step has been taken to lower costs as it braces for over $7 billion loss in revenue this fiscal year due to the pandemic. David said an additional $72 million in cost of equipment will be saved in the next 5 years. These job cuts will be on top of the 6,000 announced earlier in June, causing a 30% staff shortfall overall compared with the pre-pandemic time. Most of Qantas ground handling employees are receiving government aid due to the decline in travel demand after losing their jobs. Facebook's French subsidiary has agreed to pay $118 million in back taxes after a 10-year audit of its accounts. France is pushing hard to overhaul international tax rules on digital companies such as Facebook, Alphabet, Google, Apple and Amazon. French authorities say the big tech group pay too little tax in the country where they have significant sales. Facebook's spokesman said since 2018 the company had decided to include its advertising sales in France in its annual accounts. As a result, Facebook's total net revenue almost doubled in 2019 from a year earlier. Meanwhile, stocks in the Asia-Pacific are trading higher as investors are optimistic after new progress in the US and China trade talks. Mainland Chinese stocks traded mixed. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index edged about 0.5% lower. Japan's Nikkei 225 jumped almost 2%, while the Topix Index advanced more than 1.5%. South Korea's Kospi rose by almost 1.5%. Shares in Australia also edged higher, with the ASX 200 gaining fractionally. Oil prices are mixed as international benchmark Brent crude gains marginally. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.